In this podcast episode, we'll be talking about how to stop people pleasing and how to challenge your clients and become indispensable.
Welkom bij de Storybrand podcast, waar wij geloven: if you confuse, you lose. Ruis in je communicatie is je grootste vijand. En het creëren van een duidelijke boodschap is de sleutel om je bedrijf te laten groeien. Dit is de Storybrand podcast.
A very warm welcome to the Storybrand podcast. Another one in English because we have an English-speaking guest, so we'll do the introduction and the outro, etc. Also in English. I'm very pleased that you're listening to this podcast this week. We have a great guest. He's from Scotland. His name is Chris Marr. He has become a friend during the last 2 years, and many times he is here with the team working, speaking at our events, giving workshops with us for the Storybrand Guide community, and a whole lot of things more. We'll be talking with him today about his book, Become an Authoritative Coach, Stop People Pleasing, Challenge Your Clients and Be Indispensable. A little book that you can buy on Amazon. And I'm going to interview Chris about, how can we stop pleasing people? I've noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs please people, including myself. We tend to be in business services, and therefore we are service-oriented. And because we're service-oriented, we want to give the best and be the best for clients, maybe also for our team, etc. But Chris says that pleasing people may not be the best thing you can do in order to please your team or please your clients. So it's a very interesting subject where we all can learn from. Communication. Really about words, really about what do we say, how do we say it, how do we behave, where is our behavior coming from, why do we do what we do, why do we say what we say. So I think it's a very big subject, and there's a whole lot there. We can't cover everything, but I feel like we're going to have a discussion that is really going to the core of why we do what we do and how we can change that. And what I've learned from Chris is a whole bunch of frameworks in communication that are very simple. That one of the most important things we can do is to start become curious and at the same time ask good questions. And if you've been a consultant, or if you are a consultant in some ways, like consulting clients to make the right choices, helping them to make the best choices, a lot of times we try to come up with the best answers instead of asking the right questions. So this is really about communication in a big way. And I really look forward to this conversation with Chris. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Chris Marr. Chris Marr, also known as the Authoritative Coach, is a renowned coach and mentor based in the beautiful city of Dundee, Scotland. With over thousands of hours of coaching experience with companies of all sizes, Chris has established himself as a true expert in his field. Prior to launching the Authoritative Coach, Chris was responsible for leading, training and coaching all-day Ask You Answer coaches across the world. He is the first certified Ask You Answer coach, demonstrating his commitment to staying at the forefront of his profession. Aside from his extensive coaching background, Chris is also a Stoic practitioner and philosopher, fascinated by human behavior and dedicated to studying anything and everything that can help him understand people better. Chris's passion for continuous learning and professional development is unwavering and evident in his ongoing pursuit of knowledge. Chris's experience, expertise and commitment to his profession make him one of the most sought-after coaches in the industry. With his knowledge and insights, he helps businesses and individuals achieve their full potential and reach their personal and professional goals. Here is Chris Marr. All right, Chris, welcome in the Storybrand podcast studio.
Well, it's great to be here finally.
We already had a pretty amazing chat this morning at breakfast.
Yeah.
We should have recorded that.
Pretty deep for 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
But today I want to talk with you about your new book, Become an Authoritative Coach. And what I especially like about the book is the subtitle, Stop People Pleasing and Challenge Your Clients and Be Indispensable. and the foreword was written by nobody less than Marcus Sheridan.
Right.
So, yeah, let's dive into the subject matter first, and then we'll see how this conversation is going to go. Before I ask you a question, I would like to introduce you by saying that the lessons that I learned from you in communication, because that's where this book is really about, has really changed my life. And that's a big statement. Like, anybody can say that pretty easily. It changed my life, but it really did. That's how powerful I think the lessons are in this book. And it's interesting about your book. I've never read stuff like that before anywhere else. And I've been reading for a long time and tried to be a student of life and personal development, business development for a long time. But this is such a different angle. So, yeah, maybe you can tell the listener a little bit about what's in the book, what to expect, what does it make so different? Because I'm not the first one that told you that it's really different, right?
Right. I think the first thing to understand is that the book, you know how people say you write the book that you want to read, or you write the book that you've become, perhaps. And I think that's a big part of it. It's like the book is an outcome from all the work that I have done. Yeah. So that's all the mistakes I've made, all the errors I've made, all the observations I've made, and then thousands and thousands of hours of coaching and doing that work with clients.
Yeah.
And I oftentimes think, you know, someone could have been doing the same work as me at the same time with the same people, but there's always been, for a long time, for 25 years, maybe longer, there's always been a part of me wanting to draw as much from the thing I'm doing. And I think the book is a big part of that. It's like I've documented the journey somewhat, and so pulled out all those insights. And so I think for me, it was doing the work, but also a lot of reflection. How could I have done that better? What makes communication work well? And just spending a lot more time thinking about it than maybe most other people.
Yeah.
And trying to draw into it a bit more and figure out what's actually happening in these relationships with clients, what makes these relationships work, what makes them not work, what causes friction, what causes success, how do we make impact as a coach, what's the role of a coach, what's the mindset of the coach, what's the approach. And I think a lot about it. I think more probably than most people. I think that's what's come from the book, really, was. And then, you know, looking at my own journey, I think I'm my own case study in a lot of ways. I went from being a people pleaser, and wanting to sort of show my value in a tangible way. So I would do things for people. And then over the last 10 years, just seeing my own journey and understanding the impact that I'm supposed to make on the world isn't about doing the work for people, but actually helping them to do their best work.
Wow.
And I think that's a big part of it too, is like looking at it as like, that's my journey. But then even more so, having worked with coaches and consultants and leaders, seeing that that's also their struggle. I would argue 80% of the people I work with have people-pleasing tendencies, whether that's social conditioning or just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And they know that it's a challenge. They can see that their people-pleasing tendencies are really holding them back from being great at what they do, but also holding their clients back from the growth that they need to see as well. So the more I dove into, so there's three parts here. The more I dove into like what was actually happening in my work, and then into what my whole journey looked like. And then it was simply, you know, reflected in the people I was working with as well. So you could see that this was a journey that a lot of people were trying to figure out for themselves as well. So I think that it all became real for me, and seeing that this was something that people were, like, as I shared my lessons, people were benefiting from it too.
Yeah. So before we dive into it, I can imagine as an entrepreneur, professional, manager, a marketeer, whoever is listening, they might think, I'm not a coach, so the book's not for me. And can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I believe that you believe that we might be more of a coach in our relationship with our clients than just a consultant.
So this is the challenge of titling a book. You can't say, you can't title a book like this book's for everybody, because then no one buys it. So you have to sort of pick a lane, pick a title.
Yeah.
But when you look at the reviews on Amazon, for example, a lot of people are saying this has helped me in my personal life, with my marriage, my partner. This isn't a book about business. This is a book about life or whatever. And so this is the challenge I had, was trying to figure out how to package this up in a way that it helps as many people as possible. But you're absolutely right. It's like the principles in the book are going to help you communicate across your whole life. But if you dig into just that relationship you have with your clients, even if you're like a manager, it's trying to see that there's a difference between the skills of a manager, the skills and approach of a leader, and even the skills and the approach as a coach. These are different hats with different sets of skills for different purposes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's something that you embrace as you get older, but you get to a point, maybe you read the book and you figure this out for yourself, but you've got a choice, I think. Do you want to spend your whole life telling people what to do and saving them from their mistakes? Or do you want to get to a position where you can let go of all of that and actually help people grow into it themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And so a big part of being a coach is letting go of the need to be right, letting go of the need to sort of make it all about you. And you're not the hero in this story. You're behind the curtain, helping, like anybody that's got a coach or has an experience with a coach will understand this, if they had a good coach, that is, that that coach was trying to draw out your potential. And so as you're working with your clients, whether you're working with clients or you're working with your team, the getting to this position where your approach is actually less about you and more about them, and trying to draw out the best work from them, changes your approach, because it's no longer about telling them what to do. You have to help them figure it out for themselves.
Right.
And that's more of a coaching style.
Yeah. And that's an interesting approach to a relationship, whether it's a client or a private relationship,
right,
or a colleague or a coworker. It's in every relationship. The book is really about communication, actually.
If you're a parent, you got kids, you have a partner. If you talk to anybody, any relationship, you have a choice in how you want to approach that relationship. Really. Yeah. That's what it's all about. It's like, do you want to choose to be the type of friend, the type of parent, the type of partner, the type of boss, the type of, partner in business, where people love to be around you because you challenge them, you get them to think for themselves, you don't judge them, you somehow make them feel special and smart, and they leave your presence feeling great. And
I love that.
That's a big part of it as well. It's like
the presence.
Yeah. They feel like the relationship's strong, but they feel like they get something from it as well. So
it's interesting, I think a lot of people can recognize the story of people pleasing. We all feel like it's not doing justice, at least to ourselves, when we please people. But for instance, if you have a business and you are in a service business, I think service businesses tend to have people in the business, especially the owner who is in a service. You don't accidentally start a service business. It has to do with your DNA. So people pleasing might be stronger in some environments, but any human being in some capacity, less or more, knows the feeling of pleasing people. Why did you stop pleasing people? Or how did you stop pleasing people? And what is the thing that we can put in the place of pleasing people?
Yeah, there's a lot to this. I'll try and simplify it down. It's trying to figure out where people pleasing is coming from. Like, what's the root of all of that? And so,
is it guilt?
It could be guilt. It could be a lack of self-respect and self-confidence. What's the outcome of people pleasing? Well, I'm doing a lot of work. I get to prove my value. I get to show people how smart I am. I can do the work like I'm doing it. And so you can sort of prove your worth in a lot of ways, like in tangible ways. But as I've went through the journey, like if I just fast forward to the other side of the spectrum there, I swing the pendulum the other way, I don't do anything anymore. Like I don't produce anything. So coaching doesn't have I can't point at something and say, there's the thing I did. And you have to let go of that as well. So there's something on the people-pleasing side. There's a lot of things that hook you into it, which is proving your value. There's a sort of, you can turn up to work and you can see the thing that you produce.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to be better coaches or better consultants or better leaders, it's realizing that your people-pleasing tendencies are really probably coming from a place of it diminishes your authority.
Yeah.
Right. It can diminish your authority and diminish your self-respect. So, you're trying to bridge this gap, or you're trying to increase your self-respect, but also the respect you get from the client. So what happens is if you're doing a lot of people pleasing, it means you're saying yes to a lot of things that you probably should be saying no to. You're probably not pushing back on your clients or your team members as much and challenging them. And so what happens is that it diminishes the value that you bring as well, and the respect that you get from people. And so the best way to think about this, I think, is just think about any leader that you truly respect in your life. If you think about someone, everybody knows someone. It could be, it could even be like a grandparent or something like that. Just look at them and think, what is it about them that makes you respect them? And it's usually things like, they know who they are. Yeah. They're really confident in who they are, but not in an aggressive way. They carry themselves well. You know who you are with them. And you just get a sense of like they're a really good person.
Right.
They just carry themselves in a sort of value-based way. But when you're a people pleaser, you change who you are based on the relationship because you want to please that other person. So you end up changing who you are to please them.
Yeah, it's one of the things that you talk about is being liked versus being respected.
That's right.
What do you want? You want to be liked or respected, and can you be both?
Yeah, if you want to be liked, you end up doing a lot. You end up, you want a pat on the back, you want to look smart, all the things we've talked about already.
Yeah.
You have, in order to really, to get towards being an authoritative coach and get into that authoritative peer status, it can't be about being liked. Because if you want to be liked, you're really saying, do you like me? Hey, look at me, I'm performing in a way that you're trying to like even make assumptions about what they want from you. But when you think about it, the people that you respect, they don't change based on what you want. They are who they are. And so for each of us, we have to think about, how do we want to turn up in the world? What do we want? What does confidence look like? What's our values that are driving us? I'm not going to change me based on what I think other people want from me, because I know that that's not it.
Yeah.
So how do you get from, and so the question is, do you want to be liked or do you want to be respected?
One of the things that you do in your coaching calls, because you were my coach,
right?
In some ways you still are. Yeah, I do. But when I signed up for the They Ask You Answer certification, you were the leader, you were the coach. 2 observations I made. Mm-hmm. You are okay with silence. So somebody comes up with a statement in the coaching group, and Chris went, I have to think about that. And I saw your face, And you just were okay with silence and thinking. And for me, that was like, I'm not used to this, because I am in this consultant mindset where if somebody comes up with a question, a client, for example, I need to have an answer. I need to solve the problem. And most of the time, you did not answer a question with an answer. You answered a question with a question.
Right.
And that's one of the deep fundamentals in your book. Question first.
Yeah. Again, we're back to, the mindset and the approach is not to try and dive in and save someone. Part of helping people to learn and bring out the best in them is to help them struggle to find the answer for themselves. And what you learn is that if you really want people to grow in your company, you can't just, you can't give them the answers to everything. You have to help them figure out for themselves, because if they land on the answer for themselves, they're more likely to feel like, I came up with that myself. Wow, that's the answer. I want to be, as a coach, I want to be in a position, Dan, where I say to you, you know what, Dan, you are absolutely right. That's exactly what you should do. But in most cases, Dan, you the client, me the coach, it's you that says to me, Chris, oh, you're amazing. You're such an amazing coach. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what I should do. And I'm the hero. That's not it. What I love to hear is when I'm saying to the client, you're right. That's exactly what you should do. Because that tells me that I've asked a lot of good questions. I've been really curious about where you want to go. I don't know I could have an answer, but it might not be the answer that you need. And that answer comes from within you. And that's what Question First is all about. It's about self-discovery. It's about ownership. It's about helping people figure out what their own path is going to be. And that's not up to me to dictate. That needs to come from you.
It's not how we interact. As you know, if you look at children, you have children, I have children, they're in school. Mm-hmm. You go to school, somebody asks you a question as a child, you have to give an answer. You grow up in a home where most of the time a parent asks something and you have to have an answer or do something. So it's so unnatural to ask questions. So one of the most powerful chapters in your book, it says, what makes you say that?
Yeah.
It's one of your probably questions you ask most of the time. And it's and I like the thought about, you just mentioned the word curious, being really curious.
Yeah.
Like your client says something. If we are in the mode of consultancy and giving an answer, we will never get to the core and the deeper layers of that relationship.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of assumptions.
That's right. But there's two things on opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got assumptions on one end and questions on the other. And if you're addressing questions with an answer, you're making a lot of assumptions about things. You might not know it, but you're drawing a lot of assumptions to answer that question. Whereas if you go to the other side of the spectrum and you just ask questions and you're truly curious about what's going on there, the chances are you're going to be able to have, if you do have to give an answer, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Anyway, your kids are great. The thing about all this is that you can practice this anywhere. Like the book's about coaching and it's about client relationships, but ultimately your kids are a really good example. How many questions do kids ask on a daily basis? And how many times are you just giving answers all the time? And you find yourself getting frustrated with your kids because they're asking so many questions. But your kid might say something like, why does the moon come up? Like, what? And how does the sun go down? And you're like,
it's already day and I still see the moon. Why is that?
And then you could give them the answer, or you can help them, understand it a bit better. It's like, well, is the sun coming up, or is it the earth that's spinning? And they're like, it's just a really, it feels good. It feels like the right thing to do to help people figure out the answer for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what a big part of this is all about. It's like, yeah, okay, I could spend all day just answering questions all the time, but that makes me dependent. Like my clients then depend on me. And everybody knows what that feels like. It's like a constant barrage of like questions and problems. The best clients I've ever had are the ones I never hear from, because they're empowered and they feel like they have the permission to just get on and solve their problems, and they'll know I'm there. I can pick up if something bad happens, we're there to solve that problem. But ultimately, I don't want to be dependent upon for my clients to move on. I want to be indispensable to them, but that doesn't mean solving all their problems. It just means helping them to, empowering them to solve the problems for themselves. So it's a tough thing to really explain, I think, and articulate, because there's a lot going on there, because there's the mindset, then there's the approach, then there's the techniques. And the book has, over 100 coaching questions in it, including what makes you say that, which is a great response to most things, because people are asking questions coming from a place that you don't know. So that's curious. What makes you say that? Yeah. What makes you say that?
And sometimes they're not aware of how they have articulated the question anyways.
Yeah. Like that's one of my favorites. My other favorite is, well, what's an example? Like, that's a really good place to start. When someone asks this question, it's like, well, that's interesting. So what would be an example of that? Or, and they can describe and explain, and you can get a much better sense of it.
I've seen you do it yesterday. We had a lunch and learn. Mm-hmm. We're doing one in a couple of hours. But your whole approach from stage is the same way. It's you interact with people based on curiosity.
Yes. So this is very deliberate.
Yeah.
So the big lesson here is when you want to change someone's perspective about something, so in this case, digital sales and marketing, to get them to think differently about it, and you want them to buy into, perhaps buy into a new idea, and thirdly, there's going to be resistance or pushback on it, right? You don't tell people. So if you know it's something new, they have to buy into it. They have to change their perspective. And there's going to be resistance. And this is a leadership lesson in communication as well, is you don't tell people what to do at this point.
No.
You have to ask questions so that they can discover it for themselves.
Yeah.
So if I want to help people see that the way that people are buying has changed, I can't just say it. I need them to say to me, oh, that's really interesting, Chris, that you're right. Over the last 10 years, the way we buy has changed. I never really thought about it before. And I'm like, now we're getting somewhere. They're saying it. If I say it, it doesn't land. If they get there themselves and then they say it, they're more likely to buy into it. So buy-in, resistance, change is all about the questions you ask and the conversations you can have with people. They're doing more of the talking. You're asking questions, and there's things that they have to say in order for them to buy into it. That's a big part of that's what you see when I think about the lunch and learn we're doing today, for example.
Right.
I know the first question I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
It's not a statement. It's a question.
You already prepared.
The question is the key because there's certain things that they need to say, not me. I could say it, but it's much better if they say it. And so if you look at this is a good example because everybody's been to a conference. Everybody's watched someone speak, and next time you go to a conference, you'll see this. Most of the talks, not a single question. Most of the talks, the audience don't say a thing.
No.
You see this all the time. But from the very first thing I do, the audience are speaking to me almost from the start.
Yeah.
And it's deliberate.
You set the stage.
It's deliberate. They have to say it. They have to be involved in this conversation because by the end of the presentation, they should be thinking differently. And they're not going to get there just by me talking at them.
Yeah. Well, I felt... So we're back in time, I think it was January 2023 that I started in that coaching program that you led.
Right.
And I remember at a certain moment that you've asked feedback from the group.
Okay.
And you went around the room and everybody responded, how are we doing so far? What have we learned? How is this helping you? And my response was, and it was actually because of your question, a realization in my mind, it's been a long time since I felt so inadequate in my profession because I'm learning something new that is stretching my mind and my capabilities. I've been trusting on this route, consultant, trying to have the answer, staying ahead of the client, not being the smartest in the room, but they come to me and they have a problem and I want to solve it.
No, you're the expert.
Same with the team.
Right.
And I found that it's really hard to change one's mind to question first. And in some ways, it's almost like tennis. The ball comes your way and the response is you get your record and you hit the ball before another ball comes. It's like the problem-solving solution thing we've been in for such a long time, which is really exhausting. And then I bump into Chris Marr, who is in a coaching call with professionals that come to learn something. And one of the chapters in your book is about asking shorter questions. And what I like about your book is that it all starts with a quote. And the quote you start this chapter with is, I begin to speak only when I'm certain what I'll say isn't better left unsaid, from Cato. And in the book you say, have questions ready, like you just said about what you're going to do this afternoon. You already have your question ready, but ask shorter questions and ask different questions.
Right.
And I don't know where to start. I saw in one of the workshops that you did in our office for the StoryBrand Certified Guide community that there's two kind of people that come to your workshop. This is my observation. It's not the truth. It's just what I saw. I saw people that leaned into it while feeling the uncomfortableness of like, man, this is so far away from where I want to be. I can see that this can help me. And I saw people that leaned into it a little bit, then leaned back in their chair and went from their heart to their head and thought, this is too hard. This is, Chris, I like the idea. It's a great idea. And I'll play with it.
Right.
What's your perspective on that? Because it's stretching. It's your journey for a lifetime that you put in the book, but it's stretching.
My hope would be that people come around to it. It's like any workshop that you do. Some people are going to get it right away, and for some people, it's going to take a bit of time. One of the stories. It's funny because one of the things that we do at the start of these workshops deliberately is we talk about Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And we talk about the story about how Daniel gets really frustrated because he's sanding fences, or painting fences, he's, waxing the car. And he's like, why am I came here to learn karate so I could defend myself against these bullies. And yet you're like, I'm waxing the car and I'm painting fences and sanding floors. Like, what's going on? And he's getting really frustrated about the whole thing until Mr. Miyagi throws a punch and he waxes off. And it's like in that moment, he gets it. He's like, click, the penny's dropped. I now understand why you were getting me to do all of this. And this stuff that we're talking about today is no different than that. That penny is going to drop for some people in the workshop, listening to this workshop, reading the book.
Yeah.
And I hope that the penny drops for everybody eventually, but for some people it won't. But for some it might take a bit longer, right? To get it, to see it. That you could be like, what's going to happen is you're going to get into high stakes conversations and situations with clients as you grow, or clients or anybody. Really high stakes situations being really difficult conversations with your wife or your husband.
Right.
And you're going to realize that your communication skills are holding you back from being able to get through something or figure something out. Especially if you get into arguments or debates, high stakes, difficult situations. Emotional. And and it's all about situational awareness, and self-awareness is a big part of this as well. But you get stuck and you just can't see why we can't get through this. And it's because you want to be right and you're not being curious and you're not asking questions. You're not trying to see it from someone else's perspective.
Your ego is in the way.
Right. All of that. But it doesn't matter what situation you're in, a high stakes situation with your clients. It's all the same thing. I've made these mistakes. I know that the biggest mistakes I've made are when I was getting in my own way with what was happening. I couldn't see the problem because I felt frustrated or I was angry, and my emotions were influencing my communication, right, in a bad way.
Yeah.
So oftentimes with any of this stuff, it's about regulating those emotions. You can allow them to be there, but you have to be aware of them and think to yourself, actually, this isn't about me right now.
No.
Why? Because that's all anger and frustration is. It's like you now trying to make this about you.
Yeah.
Similarly, when your clients get frustrated and angry with you, you can also get frustrated and angry. There's something about that. And I talk about this quite a lot. It's like I'm probably unusually comfortable sitting in frustrating situations with clients, to the point where a client could come to me and say, Chris, we think your training sucks. We don't like working with you. And I'll sit there and go, oh, why is that then? Like, what is it that's going on? Do you know? And it's like your ability to not make it about you, because it never is about you. It's always about the client and what they're going through and why they're going through it. It's nothing to do with you.
No. Don't take it personal.
Don't take it personally. Like, don't make assumptions. Don't take it personally. If you can, again, we're back to like, this is hard stuff, right? It's not like a light switch. You just switch it on and switch it off. But there's a lot of growth in there. And I think if you can get that, dial in that self-awareness, like the frequency on a radio station, right? You're trying to get a bit more clear about who you are and how you want to turn up in this world and what type of work you want to do and what type of person you want to be. And then somehow get over yourself.
Yes.
And not make every situation about you and be okay. Like you talked about, it's like be okay in uncomfortable situations. Know that we can get through this. Know that your communication skills, as they improve, you can help people overcome difficult situations, things they can't get their head around. And that's what we're trying to work on, is trying to improve those skills so people can be, arguably, anybody listening to this show will know this. It's like, as you become a leader, as you grow in your personal life, in your work, professional life, 90% of the work you do is about communication.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe more. But arguably, the majority of it is really about how you turn up and how you communicate. You'll either get yourself into trouble because of your communication, or you'll allow everybody to grow and succeed in their potential because of the way you communicate. And as you become a leader, you know this yourself, right? You've got a team around you. 90% of your job is how you turn up.
Yeah, it is. One of the guests in our podcast has written a book. It's called Growth Pain. He says growth happens outside of our comfort zone, and therefore it's painful. There's friction.
Right. Agreed.
And one of the things in your relationship with your client, there's always potential for growth, and it's in the friction. It's in the conflict. It's in the pain. It's not when everything goes right. I mean,
that's a great point.
Success is not the place where you learn. It's the mistakes where you learn.
And if we come back to people pleasing here, I think it's relevant, because if you've got a pendulum, and on one side you've got people pleasing, and on the other side you've got a more authoritative, challenging approach. Yeah. The people pleaser is going to try and, Dan, if I can see that you're frustrated and struggling right now, people pleaser is going to say, I can save you. I'm going to stop you feeling like this. So I have clients sometimes, they get really upset on calls with me and sessions with me because I'm really pushing them past where their head is at. And I can see them, and they'll say to me sometimes, look, I'm going to have to take a break. I need, whatever it might be. Yeah. But the reason is that I need to be able to sit comfortably when it's painful for someone else. I need to be able to sit comfortably and hold a space for someone when they're struggling. Yeah.
You have to have a healthy relationship with conflict.
Right.
A different perspective.
Right. And know that it's not about, I'm not supposed to save you here. No. You're growing right now. If I come in and try and save you right now, I'm going to stop you from growing. I'll give you a really great example of this, right? And I hope my mum she probably won't listen to this. Or maybe she'll be the only person that listens to it. Who knows? We were at a clipping climb, which is like a kid's version of wall climbing. So it's a safer version of wall climbing. Nice. The kids are supposed to go and do it themselves, right? So I've got my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old in there, right? And the 8-year-old Spencer, he's like flying up the walls, doesn't care, right? But Luna Rose, 6 years old, she goes in and she sort of stands around for 10 minutes or so, just like taking it all in, touching things, trying to get a feel for things. And whilst everyone's like just scaling the walls, she's just like sort of figuring it out. And my mum is literally vibrating. She's like, I need to go in and save, I need to go in and help her. She needs to get on the walls and climb the walls. And I'm like, Mum, you have to, if you go in right now, she's not going to learn herself what to do.
And she probably will not climb.
She probably won't climb.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't, she was so she's literally vibrating and didn't know what to do with her body, because she was like, I need to go in, we're spending this money, she's only in for an hour, she's not going to get to climb and all the rest of it. And I said, if she's struggling, she'll come to us. And this is just a great, I think, anecdotal story of what we're trying to do as coaches is, it's not my job to save you.
No.
Right? It's not my job to save you from it. In fact,
I like that.
I'm supposed to see you struggling right now, but know, I know you are capable.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
So I know and if I believe that you're capable and you have the potential to do this, I'm not supposed to save you because you're supposed to grow right now into this other role or this whatever it might be. And that's no different from my 6-year-old. Parenting, the helicopter parenting that we do, right? We're trying to save our kids. We don't want them to skin their knees. We don't want them to get hurt or whatever.
It's interesting.
They have to do it. They have to go through this themselves. And by the way, at the end of the clip and climb, I asked Luna, did you have a nice time? Did you enjoy yourself? She said, it was amazing. It was amazing. But from our perspective, we didn't see her climbing all the way to the top. You know, she didn't do what we would determine as success.
Right.
Or what the goal is.
I like that.
But she's having fun.
Great example.
So I think that's a good example of, and the good thing is between me and my mum is desperate to make sure she gets, like that Luna gets her version of what success looks like. And it was good for me because I was able to swing the other way completely and say, you've got to leave her.
Yeah.
Let her come to you.
Very powerful lesson.
Yeah. So I think, but I don't see that coaching is any different than that. I think it's the same. It's exactly what we're trying to do here, is to not make it about
it's
us.
Never.
It's about making sure that you can create the environment for your clients to be successful at their highest potential.
Right. It makes me think of one of my girls. She's into skateboarding, and every Sunday she has lessons in skateboarding.
Wow.
And the guy who teaches her wants to be liked. So the progression of skateboarding was rather slow, but because I did not have any comparison, I wasn't aware of that. Until one day, we turned up on the Sunday afternoon for skateboard lessons, and we heard that he was ill. So somebody else would drop in and give skateboard lessons. And he didn't want to be liked. He just wanted her to be able to skateboard. So what happened is that in that one lesson, she learned the drop in, right? You know, you're on the ramp and you have to just no hands held. You do the drop in, and it's very scary because it's your length plus the height of the ramp. So for a kid to, without help, just drop in, it's one of these learning curves with skateboarding that you have to go through. So the week after, she said, I hope that, I don't know his name, I hope that he is back and he will teach me. And I was like, I hope he isn't. Because the progression you made in one lesson is more than the progression you made in all these lessons before in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think, you telling this story makes me realize I need to have a discussion with my girl, and it's her choice, it's about fun. So I'll let her have the choice. But who taught you the drop-in without holding hands? Because I filmed it, so I can show her the movie first and then have this question, like, who taught you that? So, a year from now, where do you want to be in skateboarding? Who could help you to get further? And I think sometimes we stop the growth of our clients in a relationship or in the growth of our company or in the growth of any relationship by being liked versus being respected and help and thinking. Because being liked is really what I hear you say. It's not about you.
Yeah. When you want to be liked, you're trying to do everything to make sure that there's no problems.
Yeah.
You don't want friction, you don't want frustration, but learning happens in the friction and the frustration. So your need to be liked is holding everybody back from growing, including yourself, especially your clients.
Yeah.
There's a great book called The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galloway. And in that book, he talks about how teachers and trainers overteach and overtrain. So they're like, no, do it like this, do it like that, put that there, do this, do that. And it's all telling. But what he found is that there's another part of your brain that actually responds better, which is almost sensing it and feeling it. Like, for example, if you're learning how to play tennis, it's actually better that you look at yourself in the mirror and just try and mimic a different way rather than someone telling you what to do. So I think coming back to the skateboard teacher, it might be a need to be liked, but it's also a need to be like the expert and know exactly what to do. But actually you don't know. The best person that knows is the person who's skating and that they have a sense of it. That's what you really want. You want the skateboard to become their feet.
Yeah.
And that's only going to happen through like themselves, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell somebody that. So I think learning is experiential. Like it needs to become something that, it's a process that someone's going through. And similarly, David Epstein talks about this in Range as well. This stuff sticks with me because I feel like as much as I talk about coaching, I just see myself as a teacher, but a good teacher, not a bad teacher.
Yeah.
And part of good teaching is knowing that learning is frustrating. It should be frustrating and it should feel slower than you think. But the world that we live in, 2024, everyone wants their learning fast and easy and simple. That's not learning. Learning is frustrating and slow and difficult because that's where the learning takes place.
The word we haven't spoken about is really an important word. It says it doesn't say become a coach. It says become an authoritative coach. You thought about that title and you actually start the book with the definition. And your definition is able to be trusted as being accurate or true, reliable, commanding and self-confident, likely to be respected and obeyed.
Okay.
So it's interesting to talk about authority because here in Holland, we live in a culture where authority is a dirty word.
That's right.
And in some ways, this is a cultural thing worldwide. I remember as an 18-year-old kid going to the US for the first time, and I was on Dallas Airport, and there were these lines like you have in an attraction park, right? But there was nobody there. So I thought, let's skip the lines. I'll just walk over these lines. I'll just jump over it, and I'll be fast at the counter, and I'm not hurting anybody, right? A police officer grabbed me, and he said, "No, they're there for a reason. You go back." And I remember it made an impression on me. That whole trip, I could see that in the US, there's a different culture than here in Europe, where, and it's changing in the US in a big way. I mean, this is 30 years ago. But I felt like there's, in some ways, more respect for authority. And here sometimes, who are you, So I think we have a very different relationship with. So the word authoritative coach can bring up some emotions with people,
right?
And they're missing your whole point with it.
They are, because the word's not authority; it's authoritative. So, like when you talk about authority, and people have had a bad experience or a negative experience with someone or something in authority, it usually means that they felt like someone had power over them. That's what authority tends to be. The story we tell ourselves is that somebody had power over me, grabbed you by the collar, physically forced you to do something, or manipulated you in some way. That's power over. That's the negative part of it. Yeah. Authoritative is back to everything we've talked about, which is really about your values and how you turn up in the world as an authoritative person. Somebody that knows who they are confident in their expertise, and doesn't feel like they need to tell people what it is. They can help someone through it without making it about themselves. So authoritative is almost like someone else would say it about you rather than you saying it about yourself.
Yeah.
And, I picked that word. Did I overthink that word? I don't know. The part of coaching is about transformation.
Yeah.
Right. Helping people to transform. And when we say transform, what we mean is that they become an upgraded version of themselves somehow. They're not going to go back to who they were. That's transformation, right? So it's about transformation. The word authority or authoritative for me is about respect. And it's about, just think about it. Imagine that you were a coach and you had this expertise, right? And you've got this great stuff in your mind and all the experience you've had. You can really help people. But the way you turn up, nobody actually respects your expertise.
Right.
Because you turn up in a way, they're like if I turned up and I was like, well, maybe you could do this, or maybe you could do that, or, well, I don't really know, I'm not sure of myself, right? I don't have respect for my own self. If I turn up like that, the likelihood of people that are going to take my lead and want my coaching I'm diminishing my own authority, essentially.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that the way we turn up helps people to respect us, and we get that it's an authoritative approach. It's about behavior rather than power over.
Yeah.
And so it's about making sure that we don't do things that diminish our authority with the intention that the authority that we bring helps bring out success in other people. Right. So it's about making all of this stuff that we're talking about, Dan, can be used for bad or it can be used for good.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do here is find a way to make it good for other people, so it brings out the best in them. And that's the tricky part about all this. Is like the big...
That's the power of principles.
It is, like there's lots of people that will use all these communication principles to manipulate people.
Absolutely.
And lie to people and get them to do things that are bad for them.
Yeah.
We're trying to do the other thing, which is trying to use, I guess the word authority is a really good example of that, because most people see it as a negative word, or they have negative stories that are attached to it. We're trying to figure out, well, how do we turn that into something that's good for people?
Yeah.
And what we're looking for is our clients to turn up to the work that we do, to take it seriously, because we want them to change somehow. We want them to make the progress or get the success that they want in the world. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how to help people. I've been on this journey for, I think, since my teenage years, trying to figure out how I help people.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's like at the root of all of this, is what can I do to help people? And I know the way I turn up is important. Like if I turn up in a way that diminishes my own authority, people aren't going to want my help or take it seriously. And so there's a fine line between, there's a fine line there that you're playing here, is like, you want to overdo it, but it needs to be enough for people to take it seriously. Otherwise they won't appreciate it and respect it, and therefore not do it.
One of the things that I heard you say, so back 1.5 years ago, okay, I'm listening to you. Question first. I was beginning to get a little bit proud about myself that I came up with a question in certain situations where I normally would come up with an answer. Then you came with this lesson, and I think I want to close with this, Chris, because it's such a powerful lesson for all. And people can listen. They'll buy your book, they'll read it, they'll start asking questions, and I would love for you to explain a little bit about. I think it's the rulers of three, or
okay.
I think it's the rule.
The law of three.
The law of three.
Yeah.
Why is asking one question in most situations not enough? We're missing out on something.
Yeah. What you want to think about to yourself here is, when was the last time you really felt like someone took the time to really understand you, or really felt like you were seen by somebody?
Yeah.
And we're in this society where someone says, hey Dan, how are you? And you go, I'm great, thanks. How are you? And I go, I'm great. And you're like, oh, that was a particularly useless conversation, wasn't it? And you and I have talked about this just even this morning. It's like, it's amazing how quickly we can get into deep conversations.
Yeah.
And the reason we can do that, Dan, is because you're going to ask me a question about my story, and then I'm going to tell you a story, and then you're going to ask another question, and another question, and another question. And then at some point I'm going to say, you know what, Dan? I don't think I've really ever shared this with anyone before. Then we're having some type of breakthrough right now. Right?
Yeah.
That's law of three. How often is that happening in your life to you? How often is that happening in the conversations you're in? And arguably, well, okay.
It's exceptional.
I can go through all my teaching and just say like it almost never happens.
Yeah.
But to help, so if you're trying to benchmark this, how often has your client ever said to you, you know what, no one's ever asked me a question like that before?
Yeah.
Or you get a sense that they're sharing information with you that they would never share with somebody else.
Right.
How quickly does that build trust and build relationships with people? And so you're asking yourself is, are we getting to a place where we're getting to the root of something? There's some type of breakthrough about to happen. And I'm not saying that every conversation you have needs to be really deep.
No.
Right? It doesn't need to be like that all the time. But there are times where it makes sense to really go there and figure out what's behind the question, what's driving this. And oftentimes with our clients that we're working with, who's I speaking to about this? That someone was saying to me yesterday, actually, that their work is not about the person, that it's about the business. And I couldn't take that as an answer. I was like, I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Like, your job is to talk strategy, innovation. Yeah. And I said, but what happens when the CEO that you're working with gets stuck? That's a person challenge.
Yeah.
The reason they're stuck is because they're telling themselves a story. There's something going on there.
Yeah.
So you just say, well, what's going on? What's the challenge? Well, it's this. And where does that come from? So there's times where you need to go into the person to overcome the challenge so that we can move forward in business.
Yeah.
And so our job as coaches is to know when to go deep.
Yeah.
And when to use the law of three, knowing the law of three is really about understanding that the truth is beyond the third question, getting to that root. The way I look at it is like, imagine you've got this big rock or this big boulder and you've got this pickaxe and you're just chipping away at it 1, 2, 3, 4 times and then the thing cracks open. That's what you're looking for and trying to get there.
Beautiful.
If you want to have deeper conversations with people, you want to have breakthroughs with people, you want to build more trust with people, it's beyond the third question.
Yeah.
And we just have to have that situational awareness to know when the right time is. But ideally, it's when someone's stuck on something and you're trying to help them move through something. You want to find out where that's coming from. And the law of three is when that is when it really matters.
And it has to do with curiosity, because when you look at a person, when they tell you something and you begin to learn how to read facial expressions, body language, at a certain moment you begin to see in their eyes like, okay, you're telling me this, but there's more behind it.
Right. Curiosity and patience.
And patience, yeah.
This takes longer, no doubt, but it's better.
It might not work in that conversation, but a question in that conversation can lead to another conversation at another time.
The way that I train people how to get better at this, Dan, is really simple. It's like, just ask, in any situation, just ask one more question. Yeah. Just get better at being curious and asking questions. Like, that's the muscle we're trying to train here. You might not always get it right.
What are some of the short questions that you can pass on to the listener like this? You have to have this in your toolbox.
Well, one of the shortest questions you can ask is just don't say anything. Because people will fill the silence.
Right.
So if you just don't, people will talk. Just let them speak. Tell me more. Why is that? Are you happy with that? Why is that a problem? These are just the shortest little things you can do, little statements that just get people talking a little bit more about the thing. Just be curious about other people.
Yeah.
And make it your mission to want to get to know people at a deeper level. Get beyond that surface.
This is only going to work if you abide by. So it almost feels like behind these principles there are truths, and if we search for the truth, so in our artificial world was so many times we're looking for a quick fix. Chris, I'm going to buy your book because I'm looking for a communication skill or tip, or I'm going to buy the book to dive deeper into my heart. Yes, Chris, thank you. It's about relationships, or it's about, being really curious. It's not about me. So it's behind these principles. It's more about truth. It's about deeper layers.
Yeah. And, the thing about the biggest challenge I think I have as a coach in communication is that most people think they're okay at communicating. They don't think they have a problem until they start to see the problems. But the place that it is going to matter the most, there's no question about it, is that we can all be pretty good fair weather communicators.
Yeah.
It's when the stakes are high.
Yeah.
That's when it matters the most. That's when it matters the most. And as you progress in your career, not for everybody, but for those that want growth and want a better life or whatever it might be, you're going to come up against high stakes situations. And that's when these skills are going to matter more than anything.
Yeah.
And so what type of life do you want? And if you want to have a mediocre life, then you can just continue on the same path. But if you want to have more, you want to have better, whatever that might be, then you're going to need to challenge the ideas around how you turn up in this world and how you communicate.
One of the books that I took out of the closet today for giving away at the Lunch and Learn this afternoon is from John Maxwell, and the title is Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. The biggest problem with communication is that we think it took place.
That's right, yes.
I don't know who's it from, but
George Bernard Shaw, I think, is who said that, yeah.
Like it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But that just, I mean, it comes back to everything we're talking about here. It's like you can have all the techniques, all the skills, you can read all the books, but really what it comes down to is your ability to be more self-aware about who you are and how you're turning up.
Yeah.
And, training yourself to be situationally aware.
Yeah.
About how you're turning up in particular situations. Got to get outside yourself a little bit more and stop making things about you and much more about how do I create a really great environment for a good conversation to take place in here. And you sort of want to police that a little bit, with your approach. So every time you've got all these leadership books as well, it's like when I step into the room, I know a great conversation is going to take place. Yeah. Because I'm here.
Yeah.
Could you be that person? I think
Love
so.
it.
Yeah.
Last two questions I ask everybody who comes in this podcast is if all the billboards, let's say in the Netherlands, or maybe in your case, Scotland.
Yeah.
If all the billboards would be yours, what message would you put on there?
Does it have to be a polite message, does it? Yeah.
No, rather not.
I could have so many. I think the first thing that comes to mind is ask, don't tell. That's it.
Yeah.
Simple message.
I like it.
That underpins pretty much everything we've talked about.
Yeah. Cool. Last question. I know you're a reader. Leaders are readers.
Right. 5
years from now, we'll be the same person, except for the people we meet and the books we read. So what is a book? And you can name a couple because it's hard to choose, and you're probably reading a couple of books at the same time. But what are some books that have really changed your life or perspective, or are things you grab from the shelf once in a while, or think back on, or reflect on?
The first book that comes to mind is a more recent read, which is 10x is Easier Than 2x by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And the reason I'm sharing that book is because I think the title sounds hokey, but it's hugely powerful. And so again, we're back at don't judge a book by its cover, or its title in this case. So 10x is Easier Than 2x. So it's a mindset book. Change your head about what you want in life.
Wow. I haven't read that. Should I read it?
You should read it.
Okay.
If you want to be friends with me, we should read that book. It's funny because I was thinking about this the other day as you asked this, is that I have like a thing which I actually do want all my clients to read the same books as me because I want to talk to people about them, you know?
Yeah, that's important.
So 10x is Easier Than 2x. There's so many books, but the front of mind right now is, for some reason, is Cal Newport's Deep Work. And that is a repeat read every year because as time goes on, I want my work to matter.
Yeah.
And the meaning in my work is going to come out of my ability to actually produce it in some way, like a book or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
The other book that I would recommend that everybody reads, especially knowledge workers, is The Business of Expertise by David C. Baker. That's another repeat read for me, and that's about packaging up your expertise and understanding what insight is and where it comes from, and really digging into your niche. So, a lot of the books I read are books like that are about how to perform well with someone that uses their head rather than their hands. Right. And I think it's a different type of work that we all need to understand better, how to be a high-performing knowledge worker in this world. So, yeah,
what are your reading habits?
Well, they change from time to time, but mainly I would say that the biggest habit I have for reading is when I pick up a book, I'll pick it up on a Saturday morning and it will be read by Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I have this uncanny ability to just sit for hours and read. A lot of people can't because they've got something. They just have to move all the time.
And your
distracted.
wife and you both have a business.
Yep.
And you have children.
That's right.
4 children.
That's right.
So there's plenty of reason not to be able to do it.
I get up at 5 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
Always. Sometimes earlier.
Yeah.
And what drives me is like I get up because I want to
do you need a clock to do that?
No. I just wake up naturally and I get up and I read a bit.
How late do you go to bed?
Well, we're in bed by like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we still get our 8 hours of sleep, which is really important. Your nighttime routine is just as important as your morning routine. But if you want to for me, the reading's so important. I do it less. It used to be read every day.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people tier that, like 20 pages a day is like 30 books a year or whatever. I'm much more now of picking up the book that is right for me right now. So I'm buying books all the time. I'm not reading them all, but at some point I'm going to go into my library and pick it off the shelf and say, that's the book for me right now. And I'm going to read that thing right now and get what I need from it and put it back on the shelf. And so I'm much more of a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just diving in, doing the thing and coming out, as opposed to this sort of like consistent reading over time.
I like that.
And I think I've got better at that over time. So
I like that because then reading becomes a part of the theme of your life or the theme of the week or the theme of the moment.
That's right. So last month, for example, I bought all of Daniel Priestley's books. Read all of them.
Yeah.
This month I bought all of Dan Sullivan's most recent books, and I'll just read all of them. And I just dive deep into it.
Right.
I just have this patience for it, I guess.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here.
This is awesome. I've been looking forward to
all the way
for
from Scotland just for a podcast recording.
Yeah.
Chris, it's phenomenal.
It's great to be here, and I think doing a podcast in person is just a much better experience than doing it online. So thanks for having me, Dan. I really loved it.
Yeah, loved it too. Well, thank you, and see you next time.
Cheers.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of the Story Brand podcast with our guest, Chris Marr. Besides his great talent to explaining super complex things into a very apprehendable way, I like his accent as well. And I've really become to love the way that he teaches, talks, and doesn't want to become the smartest person in the room, but wants to learn, wants to grow, wants to ask the right questions. As a call to action in this episode, I would love for you to go to Amazon and buy his book, Become an Authoritative Coach. Now, we've talked during this interview about the title of the book. You may not be a coach, but really, if you want to be this person that is sought after, that your clients look for, that clients want to ask questions to, that want to be coached by you in some ways or your team. You may not be a coach, you'll never maybe be a coach, but there's something in that coaching that we can learn with our kids, with our spouses, with our friends, family, with our team, with our clients, in every situation. Really, don't be deceived by the title of the book. It's a little book that you would love to read. You will finish it very soon, in a couple of hours. And I think you will find yourself making some notes, underlining some sentences, and starting to use this book. Maybe it will be on your desk for a long time, because sometimes you will grab it and say, okay, what did Chris say? Which questions can I ask? There's about 100 questions in the book that you can ask to become a better coach. I promise you, you will not regret buying Chris' book. The link is in the show notes. And again, see you next week. Bye-bye.